Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're looking into something completely wild, Dine and Dash's Day, a Brazilian tradition. We're diving headfirst into an absurdly brilliant and, let's be honest, highly questionable tradition where future lawyers actually break the law just to snag a free lunch. In Brazil, they call it the Dia do Pendura, which roughly means hang it on the tab day. But honestly, it's literally a Dine and Dash day. It's this crazy mix of historical reverence, massive academic entitlement, and pure comedic chaos. So if you've ever wondered what happens when law students decide their future degrees somehow exempt them from paying for a steak dinner, well, you are in for an absolute treat today.
Just picture this for a second. You're an exhausted waiter in São Paulo, and a group of rowdy 20-somethings in sharp suits just polished off a 5-course meal. But instead of handing over a credit card, one of them looks you dead in the eye and drops this classic poetic excuse. Waiter, take the bill off the table and put a smile on your face. It would be stingy to charge on the 11th of August. No way, right? It's incredibly bold, it's super cheeky, and for generations, this exact line was delivered to waiters in Brazil on this specific date to justify walking out on a massive bill. You kind of have to respect the sheer audacity of it.
All right, Section 1. The ultimate free lunch. To understand how people who are literally studying to uphold the law could justify essentially stealing a meal, we really need to look at what exactly happens on the Dia do Pendura.
So here's the context. August 11th is officially Lawyers' Day in Brazil. Now, for most, it's a day to celebrate the legal profession. But for law students, especially historically, it hasn't exactly been about polite networking. Nope, it's the day you walk into a restaurant, confidently declare the meal is on the house, and fully expect the owner to just smile and nod. Seriously, imagine trying this at your local spot today. Walking in, eating an absolute feast, and then casually announcing the establishment is footing the bill just because you're studying for the bar exam. Yeah, you'd be thrown out, or arrested, or probably both.
But wait, it actually gets better, because it's not just a chaotic run for the door. The ritual has these strict, highly theatrical steps. Step 1, the students gather and eat a massive, expensive meal. Step 2, at the end of the feast, the most eloquent senior student, usually someone right about to graduate, stands up on a chair right in the middle of the dining room. They put on their absolute best courtroom voice and give this grandiose speech, declaring the restaurant a distinguished environment fully worthy of hosting the glorious future bachelors of law. And Step 3, after showering the totally confused staff with these over-the-top compliments, they all bolt, or at the very least they flat out refuse to pay.
Moving on to Section 2, an imperial origin story. The real question here is where this bizarre sense of elite entitlement actually came from. Why on earth did any business owner tolerate this for even a single second?
Well, if we look at the timeline, we can see how this built up from a royal decree into a nationwide headache for the modern restaurant industry. It all started way back in 1827. Emperor Dom Pedro I issued a royal decree establishing the very first law schools in Brazil, located in São Paulo and Olinda. In those early decades, the prestige of these places was so insanely high that restaurant owners willingly offered free meals just to honor the students. But as we move into the modern era, the tradition naturally expanded to other cities, the student population skyrocketed, and owners, predictably, started pushing back against the massive financial losses.
You see, those early law students around the Largo de São Francisco in São Paulo, they were the absolute elite of Brazilian society. Before 1827, if you wanted higher education, you had to travel all the way across the ocean to Europe. So when these homegrown schools finally opened, the students were universally revered as the brilliant future of a newly independent nation. The local restaurant owners happily gave them free food as this huge gesture of civic pride, completely unaware that they were inadvertently birthing a monster of a tradition that would haunt the hospitality industry for nearly 2 centuries.
Which brings us to Section 3. Is it actually legal? As the decades passed, that elite exclusivity faded. More law schools, thousands more students, and honestly, a lot less patience from restaurants. Owners stopped playing along with the free food game, which naturally meant the police started getting involved. And this leads us to a hilarious legal paradox that literally only a group of law students could invent. On one hand, you have the restaurateur's side. Article 176 of the Brazilian Penal Code makes it a literal crime to eat at a restaurant without the resources to pay. Cut and dry, right? But then you have the student's perspective. When the cops show up, the students start whipping out dense legal Latin, claiming they have animus jocundi, which roughly means the will to joke. They literally argue that because they have the money in their pockets, but are just honoring a historical academic tradition, they lack the true criminal intent to defraud the restaurant. They exploit a legal loophole, using the very laws they are studying, to get out of Article 176, just brilliant.
Of course, nowadays, when the police are called, that whole animus jocandi excuse doesn't really fly. So they often reach a pretty practical compromise. To make sure the hardworking staff aren't penalized for a student prank, the students usually agree to pay for all their drinks and the mandatory 10% service tax, leaving only the actual food on the tab. It's a bit of a truce. The restaurants take a hit on the kitchen costs, but the waiters don't lose their hard-earned tips.
Section 4. The modern-day Pendura. Eventually, this tension just became completely unsustainable. Restaurants would literally shut their doors on August 11th, choosing to make zero money rather than deal with the headache of hundreds of students demanding a free lunch.
So, the tradition had to evolve. Today, to the massive relief of waiters everywhere, the risk of a chaotic dine and dash has largely been replaced by an absurdly diverse list of corporate sponsorships and discounts exclusively for lawyers. Instead of stealing food, modern Lawyers' Day is all about the perks. We're talking free passports to major Brazilian theme parks like Hopi Hari and Beto Carreira World, 50% off health insurance plans, discounts on legal research software, cheap law books, and even spa days, massages, and wine tastings organized by the Bar Association. The tradition of getting a freebie is absolutely alive and well, but now it's safely subsidized by big corporations instead of your local mom-and-pop restaurant.
Let's head into Section 5, from dash to charity. Honestly, this is probably the most inspiring part of this explainer. The students themselves ended up rewriting the rules of the Pendura for the modern age.
They realized the old way was hurting the very community they wanted to serve, so they flipped the script with the Pendura Social. This is a beautiful, modern adaptation where students actually pay their restaurant bill. I know, shocking, right? But it gets better. After paying for their own meals, they coordinate ahead of time to donate an equivalent amount to charitable institutions. A lot of student groups use the day to raise money and buy basic food baskets for families in poverty. Instead of stealing from local businesses, they use the historical momentum of the day to provide for those who truly need a free lunch. It's a total game changer.
The tradition flipped even further during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic with something called the Dispendura, the unhanging. When lockdowns were devastating the restaurant industry, the law students actually mobilized. They started paying for food without even eating it, specifically to save the struggling classic restaurants that had hosted them for nearly 2 centuries. It showed this deep, beautiful solidarity with the very establishments they used to prank.
To put that into perspective, in one massive coordinated effort, over 250 people paid for meals without eating at the traditional Itamaraty restaurant in downtown Sao Paulo, just desperately trying to help it survive the financial crisis. Sadly, despite this incredible effort from the students, the historic Itamaraty still closed its doors in 2021 after more than 80 years of operation. It's a bittersweet reminder of how tough the pandemic was, for sure, but it perfectly illustrates the deep bond that had formed between the academic community and local businesses.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Should outdated traditions be abandoned completely or just upgraded? Is the evolution of the Pendura, going from a royal privilege to a cheeky legal headache and finally to a day of charity, solidarity, and corporate perks, a perfect example of how we can preserve the fun of our history while leaving the harm behind? It really is a fascinating case study in how culture adapts. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you in the next explainer.